The hall was full of wolves, and every single one of them was watching her. Seraphine Voss stood at the center of the Grand Summit Hall, with her hands clasped in front of her, and her eyes fixed on the far wall. The stone floor was cold beneath her bare feet. That was the tradition. Every wolf who stepped forward to present their shift at the summit did so barefoot, so that the earth could feel what they were. Seraphine had always thought that was a beautiful idea. Standing there now, with 500 wolves watching her in complete silence, she thought it was the worst tradition ever created. She breathed in slowly. She breathed out. She waited. Nothing happened. She had known it would go this way. She had known since she was 15, and her shift never came. Every wolf in her pack had shifted by their 16th year at the latest. By 17, she had seen 4 healers, 3 elders, and 1 very expensive specialist, who charged her pack leader 3 months of trading goods just to tell them what they already suspected. There was nothing wrong with her body. There was simply no wolf to call forward. The whispering started on her left. It moved through the crowd in slow waves, the way wind moves through tall grass. She heard her name. She heard the word empty. She heard someone laugh, a short, low sound that was quickly swallowed. Then she heard footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, each one landing with the easy confidence of someone who had never once in his life needed to hurry. She did not look up. She kept her eyes on the far wall. But she heard him stop 2 meters in front of her, and the entire hall went quiet in a way it had not been before. A deep, attentive silence, like the moment before lightning hits. Is this a joke? Alpha King Kale Draven's voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It filled the room the way cold fills a room, not with noise, but with presence. He was the ruler of the 5 packs. He had held that title since he was 22, which meant he had held it for 8 years without a single successful challenge to his authority. He was not a man who laughed often. When he did, it was never kind. He laughed now. "This girl has no wolf," he said, and his voice carried to every corner of the hall without effort. "She is standing in the sacred presentation circle, with no wolf. She is wasting the summit's time." He paused. Someone from her pack should have told her before she embarrassed herself, or perhaps they were too busy being embarrassed for her. Seraphine looked at him then. She could not help it. He was looking back at her with an expression that was worse than cruelty. It was boredom. She was not even worth his contempt. She was simply a delay in his evening, a minor inconvenience in a hall full of things that actually mattered. She held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she turned and walked out of the hall. She did not run. She would not give them that. 3 days later, her pack leader handed her a folded piece of paper and could not look her in the eye while doing it. The paper said she was no longer welcome in Silver Moon territory. She had 1 hour to gather her things. She took 40 minutes. She did not want to use the full hour. She did not want anyone to think she had spent the remaining 20 minutes standing in her room, looking at the walls she had grown up inside, trying to memorize them, even if that was exactly what she did. She walked north, away from Silver Moonland, into the part of the forest no one visited. The Ashwood. Every wolf she had ever known called it cursed, a place where the trees grew silver-barked and leafless no matter the season, where the ground stayed cold even in summer, where animals refused to go. She had always been curious about it. Now, with nowhere else to go, curiosity was as good a compass as any. The pull started within an hour of walking. It was not a voice, and it was not a feeling she could easily name. It was more like the sensation of forgetting something important, that specific, nagging tug that makes a person stop walking and turn around. Except when she followed the pull, it led her forward, not back. It led her to an altar. The stone was ancient, older than anything she had seen in her pack's historical records. It was covered in silver markings that had not faded, despite what must have been centuries of rain and wind. A dead tree stood behind it, its branches reaching up like arms raised in surrender, and sitting on a flat rock beside the altar, as calm as if she had been waiting for a bus, was an old woman. "You're late," Elder Mira said. "By about 3 days, but I suppose that's forgivable." Seraphine stared at her. "Who are you?" "The last person alive who knows what you are." The old woman stood slowly, with the careful movements of someone whose knees had strong opinions. "Touch the altar." Seraphine wanted to ask more questions. She had approximately 40 of them lined up, but something about the way the elder said it, not as a suggestion, not as a command, but as a simple statement of what was about to happen, made her step forward and press her palm flat against the stone. The ground moved. Not violently. Not like an earthquake. It was more like something deep underground had taken a breath for the first time in a very long while. The silver markings on the altar lit up, faintly, briefly, and then went dark again, and somewhere inside Seraphine's chest, in a place she had never felt anything before, something shifted. Not her wolf, not yet, but something. The silver alpha bloodline, Mira said quietly, does not fail to produce a wolf. It produces a wolf that will not be rushed. The bloodline is the oldest in existence, older than the 5 packs, older than the Alpha King's line, older than the summit itself. The last silver alpha disappeared 1,000 years ago, and the bloodline has been sleeping ever since, passing through generations, waiting. Seraphine looked at her own hand, still resting on the stone. Waiting for what? For someone strong enough to carry it without breaking. The months that followed were the hardest of her life, and she had already lived through some genuinely difficult months. Mira did not teach her to shift. She said that was not something that could be taught. It would either happen or it would not, and forcing it would do more damage than waiting. Instead, she made Seraphine run, miles of it, through frozen ground and low-hanging branches, and air so cold it stung. She made her study, old texts written in a script that Seraphine spent 2 weeks just learning to read. She made her sit at the altar each morning before sunrise, and simply be still. No expectations, no effort, just presence. You spent 21 years being told you were empty, Mira said one evening, watching Seraphine stitch a cut on her own palm from a training exercise. That kind of lie gets comfortable. It moves in and starts deciding things. We are evicting it. Seraphine met Cale Draven twice during those months, both times by accident in the village near the Ashwood's eastern border, where she went twice a week for supplies. The first time, she was carrying 2 bags of grain, and he was riding through with a small guard escort. He did not recognize her. She had cut her hair and she was, as always, easy to overlook. The second time, he saw her. She watched the recognition cross his face, the slow, puzzled frown of a man trying to place someone from a context that no longer made sense. She held his gaze for exactly 1 second, bought her vegetables, and left. She did not think about him on the walk home, or at least, she tried very hard not to. The attack happened on a Tuesday. She was at the edge of the village, near the well, when the howling started. Not pack howling, rogue howling, which had a different quality entirely. Rogue wolves had no territory, and no bond to hold them steady. Their howls were ragged and uneven, like something torn. 3 of them came from the tree line at once. The village wolves scrambled, some shifting, some running for buildings, some frozen in shock. Seraphine was already moving before she had made a conscious decision to move, running toward the chaos instead of away from it, which was either very brave or very foolish, and she did not have time to decide which. She rounded the corner of the grain barn and stopped. A young girl, no older than 6, was pressed against the back of an overturned cart, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes enormous, and a rogue wolf, large and dark and completely focused, was moving toward her with the slow confidence of something that has already decided how the next 10 seconds will go. Seraphine stepped between them. She had no weapon. She had no wolf. She had 130 pounds of ordinary human girl standing in the dirt with her hands out at her sides, which was objectively not an impressive barrier. The rogue looked at her. She looked at the rogue. And then something inside her chest did not shift or turn or transform. It simply opened. The pressure dropped. She felt it in her ears first. That sudden, popping quiet, like the air itself had moved aside. Then the light came, not from above her, from inside her. It pushed through her skin, the way moonlight pushes through water, not breaking the surface, just filling it, silver white, and quiet, and absolutely enormous. She did not fall. She did not scream. She felt every bone in her body align with something ancient and patient, something that had been waiting in the deep dark of her blood for 21 years, and now it simply stepped forward and said, "Here." The wolf that emerged from her was not like other wolves. Other wolves were beautiful in their own way, powerful, graceful, true to their nature. But this wolf was something else. She stood nearly as tall as a horse. Her coat was the color of fresh snow in moonlight, so white it seemed to carry its own glow. Her eyes held no color that anyone in the village had a name for. Not amber, not green, not gray. Something older. Something that predated the words people used for colors. Every rogue wolf in the vicinity stopped moving at exactly the same moment. Then, one by one, they ran. Cale Draven had seen the light from the road. He had been riding toward the village with 2 guards when the silver glow crested the tree line. A soft, pulsing brightness that had nothing to do with fire and nothing to do with the moon, which was barely a sliver that night. He had pushed his horse to a gallop without thinking. He arrived to find his 2 village guards standing motionless in the square. He arrived to find the rogue wolves gone. He arrived to find the little girl from behind the cart now being held by her mother, who was crying with relief. And he arrived to find Seraphine Voss standing in the center of the square, human again, barefoot in the dirt, the last traces of silver light fading from her skin like early morning mist. She was looking at her own hands. One of his guards turned to him. The man had been a warrior for 12 years. Cale had never once seen him look shaken. He looked shaken now. "My lord," the guard said carefully, "you need to hear what just happened." Cale already knew. Not the details. Not yet. But he knew. He had heard the old stories. Every alpha had. The Silver Alpha bloodline, the legends said, was the original wolf. The first one. The one all others descended from. The bloodline had not produced a living wolf in 1,000 years. The scholars had long since moved it from the category of history into the category of myth. Something told to children to make them feel that their world was more magical than it actually was. He looked at Seraphine. She looked back at him. Her expression was not triumphant. It was not angry. It was simply calm. The particular calm of someone who has just understood something enormous and is still in the process of deciding what to do with that understanding. He did not speak. He did not trust himself to. Not yet. Something in his chest, in the place where his certainty lived, his absolute, unquestioned certainty about how the world was ordered and how it would remain, had developed a crack, a thin one, but real. He rode back to his estate that night and sat in his chair for a long time without lighting the lamps. Word moved fast through the 5 packs. It always did. By the end of the week, wolves Seraphine had never met were arriving at the edge of the Ashwood, not demanding anything, not challenging her. They came quietly, in small groups, and they waited outside the tree line as if unsure whether they were allowed inside. She went out to meet them each time. They were from different packs, different ranks, different ages. A few of them were elders who had kept records of the old bloodline stories. A few were young wolves who had grown up feeling like they did not belong in the rigid rank system the packs had built. All of them just wanted to see her. She let them. A letter arrived from her old pack leader. It was formal and full of careful language, and it said, between its neat lines of respectful phrasing, that he was deeply sorry and would be honored if she returned. She read it once, set it on the altar stone as a paperweight, and did not think about it again. Cale arrived on a gray afternoon, 3 weeks after the village attack. He came alone. No guards, no escort, no formal announcement of any kind, which was so unlike him that Mira, watching from the doorway of her small stone shelter, raised both eyebrows and went back inside without saying a word. He walked through the Ashwood as if he had been there before, which he had not. He found the altar clearing without help. He found Seraphine sitting on a flat rock nearby, reading one of the old texts, and he stopped at the edge of the clearing and waited for her to notice him. She let him wait for a reasonable amount of time, then she closed her book. "You came without your guard," she said. "Yes. Why?" He was quiet for a moment, not because he did not have an answer, she sensed, but because he was choosing how honest to make it. "Because what I need to say is not something I want witnesses to." She waited. He walked to the center of the clearing. He did not sit. He stood with his hands at his sides, which she recognized as the posture of someone who was choosing not to use their usual armor. Not the physical kind, but the kind built from authority and title, and the practiced ease of being the most powerful person in every room. At the summit, he said. I was wrong. I did not merely make an error in judgment. I stood in front of 500 wolves, and I used my position to make you smaller, because you did not fit the order I understood. That was not a mistake. It was a choice. And I have been thinking about it every day since the night in the village, and I cannot find a version of the story where what I did was acceptable. Seraphine looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the walk out of that hall. She thought about the folded piece of paper. She thought about 40 minutes of packing, and 20 minutes of staring at walls. I know, she said simply. He nodded, slowly. He did not ask her to forgive him. She noticed that. He had not come to collect absolution. He had come to deliver an honest accounting of himself and leave the rest in her hands. She respected that more than she expected to. The world is going to be different now, she said, after a while. The rank system, the summit, the way the packs assign worth to wolves, all of it is going to have to change. I am not doing that because I want power. I am doing it because I spent 21 years being told I was nothing, and I know how many wolves out there are being told the same thing right now. I know, he said, and something in his voice had changed. The boredom was entirely gone. In its place was something she could only describe as attention, real attention, the kind that sees. They stood in the clearing for a while after that, not filling the silence with words it did not need. The dead silver tree behind the altar caught a wind that was not blowing anywhere else, and its branches moved slowly, like something waking up. Seraphine looked at it. She thought about the 1,000 years the bloodline had slept inside ordinary people. People who were exiled or overlooked or laughed at in grand stone halls. She thought about how long patience can last when it has no other choice. Then she thought that patience, when it finally ends, is a remarkable thing to witness. She picked up her book and walked back toward Mira's shelter. After a moment, she heard Kale fall into step a few paces behind her. Not too close, not asking for anything, just present, and willing to begin. She did not rise despite what they said about her. She rose because, in the end, none of it was ever about them.